This episode is presented to you in the form of an audiobook. Before we begin the book of Joshua, it's important to take a step back and understand where the story left off. In the final chapter of Deuteronomy chapter 34, we witness the final moments of Moses, the great leader who had guided the Israelites out of Egypt and through the wilderness for 40 years. God took Moses up to Mount Nebo, and from the peak of Pisgah, he showed him the land that had been promised long ago. Moses saw the whole stretch of it, the fertile lands of Gilead, the regions of Naphtali, Ephraim, and Manasseh, the land of Judah, and all the way to the western sea. But God had made it clear. Moses would not enter. He would only see the land with his eyes. And so, on that mountain, at the age of 120, with his eyesight still strong and his vigor untouched, Moses died. God himself buried him in an undisclosed place. Israel mourned their leader for 30 days. And then the mantle was passed. That mantle was handed to Joshua, son of Nun. Joshua had long been a close assistant to Moses, his right-hand man in many ways. He had been with him on the mountain, lingered outside the tent of meeting, and stood faithfully by his side. Now, the responsibility of leading the people fell squarely on Joshua's shoulders, and this is where the book of Joshua begins, with a divine call. After Moses' death, the voice of the Lord came directly to Joshua. It wasn't gentle small talk. It was clear, commanding, and urgent. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am giving to the Israelites. This was the beginning of a new era, not just a journey across a river, but a fulfillment of generations of promise. God wasn't just giving Joshua a role. He was handing him a divine mission that would shape the destiny of a nation. God laid out the extent of the land they would possess. From the desert in the south to the mountains of Lebanon in the north, from the great Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, it would all belong to them. But even more powerful than the territory was the promise. God said, "No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you." That was more than reassurance. It was a commitment that Joshua could carry in every battle, every decision, and every moment of doubt. Then came the charge that would define Joshua's leadership. Be strong and courageous. God repeated it with weight. Joshua was to obey every word of the law that Moses had given. He was not to drift to the right or to the left. God told him to keep the book of the law always on his lips, to meditate on it day and night. It wasn't just about tactics and war. It was about heart, obedience, and relationship. If Joshua held fast to God's word, then God would be with him wherever he went. With that divine backing, Joshua rose to lead. He summoned the officers of the people and gave instructions. Get your provisions ready. In 3 days, we will cross the Jordan and take possession of the land. Joshua also spoke to the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. These tribes had already received land on the eastern side of the Jordan, but they had promised to help the rest of Israel in conquering the remaining territory. Joshua reminded them of that promise, and they responded without hesitation. "Whatever you command us, we will do," they said. "Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses." With unity and loyalty declared, Joshua's leadership was now recognized by the entire nation. As Israel prepared for this sacred crossing, Joshua made a tactical yet humble move. He selected 2 men, sharp, loyal, and trustworthy, and sent them secretly from the camp at Shittim to scout out the land, especially Jericho. Jericho wasn't just another city. It was a fortress, a gateway into the heart of Canaan with towering walls and tight security. This mission wasn't just about gathering intelligence. It was about taking the first step into a long-awaited promise. The two spies slipped quietly into Jericho and found shelter in the home of a woman named Rahab. Her house was built into the wall of the city, making it a practical hiding place. Rahab was a prostitute, but more importantly, she was a woman whom God had already been stirring. Her home, often visited by strangers, allowed the spies to blend in. But despite their efforts, word got out. The king of Jericho was informed that Israelite men had entered the city to spy. He immediately sent officials to Rahab's house with orders. "Bring out the men who came to you." Rahab faced a moment that could have ended everything, but she acted with courage and quick thinking. She had hidden the spies under stalks of flax on her roof. To the king's men, she spoke with calculated calm. "Yes, the men came to me, but I didn't know where they were from. They left at dusk when the gate was closing. If you hurry, you may catch them." The king's men believed her and pursued a false trail, locking the city gate behind them. With danger temporarily avoided, Rahab went to speak with the men she had hidden. Her words were unexpected. "I know that the Lord has given you this land," she said. "A great fear of you has fallen on us." She recounted what the people of Jericho had heard: the drying of the Red Sea, the defeat of mighty kings like Sihon and Og. "When we heard it," she confessed, "our hearts melted." But then she made a declaration that shook the boundaries of nation and religion. "The Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below." Rahab, a Canaanite woman in a pagan city, had come to believe in the God of Israel. She begged for mercy, not just for herself, but for her family. "Swear to me by the Lord," she said, "that you will show kindness to my family." The spies gave her their word. "Our lives for your lives. If you keep our secret, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you." That night, Rahab lowered the men through her window using a scarlet rope. Her home, built into the city wall, provided a quiet escape route. But the scarlet cord wasn't just a rope. It became a symbol of salvation. She was told to leave it hanging in her window and to gather her family into her house when Israel came. If she followed those instructions, she and all within her house would be spared. The spies hid in the hills for 3 days before returning to Joshua. When they came back, their message was clear. "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." The time to move had come. Early in the morning, the Israelites broke camp and traveled to the Jordan River. They camped there for 3 days, staring at the barrier that stood between them and the promise. The Jordan wasn't calm. It was swollen, flooding its banks as it did every harvest season. Crossing it without a bridge or boat seemed impossible. But God had a plan. On the 3rd day, the officers moved through the camp with instructions. "When you see the Ark of the Covenant and the Levitical priest carrying it, follow it." The Ark represented the presence of God. He would lead them into the land, but they were to keep a respectful distance, about 2,000 cubits. This was not fear, but reverence. They were being led not by a man, but by the Lord Himself. Joshua addressed the people with words that stirred their hearts. consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." This was a spiritual preparation. Before God moved physically, He was calling them to prepare spiritually. The next morning, the priests lifted the ark and began to walk toward the river. Joshua called the people to witness a sign. "Today you will know that the living God is among you." As the priests stepped into the water, a miracle began. The river, full and forceful, stopped flowing. Upstream, far away near the town of Adam, the water stood in a heap. Downstream, it emptied away. Before them stretched dry land. With the priests standing firm in the middle of the river holding the ark, the people crossed. It wasn't a rush. It was a procession of an entire nation. Families, elders, children, animals all moved across the riverbed with wide eyes and grateful hearts. The God who had parted the Red Sea had done it again. Then came a new instruction. God told Joshua to choose 12 men, one from each tribe. Each man was to go to the middle of the river and pick up a stone. These stones would not be left in the river. They would be carried to the camp and placed as a memorial. These weren't ordinary rocks. They were reminders that God had made a way. Joshua also set up 12 stones in the river itself, where the priests had stood. A hidden marker, unseen by man, but seen by God. When everything was complete, Joshua ordered the priests to come out. As soon as their feet left the riverbed and touched dry ground, the waters of the Jordan rushed back into place. The people set up camp at Gilgal. There Joshua erected the 12 stones. He turned to the Israelites and said, "In the future, when your children ask, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them. Tell them how the river stopped. Tell them how you walked on dry land. Tell them that the hand of the Lord is strong." This wasn't just a story about crossing a river. It was about laying down markers of God's faithfulness. Gilgal became a place of remembrance, a witness that the God who led them through water still leads His people today. After crossing the Jordan, the people of Israel camped at a place called Gilgal, on the eastern border of Jericho. The miracle of the crossing hadn't gone unnoticed. News spread quickly through Canaan. The kings of the Amorites to the west and the kings of the Canaanites along the coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan. Their hearts melted with fear. Their confidence vanished. Israel was no longer a wandering people. They were now a force to be reckoned with, backed by a living God. But before they could engage in any battle, God had a surprising command. "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again." This was not a minor detail. It was a sacred act. The generation that came out of Egypt had all been circumcised, but over the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, that practice had not continued. The old generation had died in the desert because of their disobedience. Now this new generation was about to inherit the promise, but they first had to reestablish their covenant with God. So Joshua obeyed. He made flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at a place called Gibeath Haraloth, which means hill of the foreskins. It was a painful pause in a time of war, but spiritually necessary. It was as if God was saying, "Before you conquer anything on the outside, you must first be right with me on the inside." The people remained in their camp, healing. And then God said something intimate and powerful to Joshua. "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." That's why the place was called Gilgal, which means rolling. The past was being rolled off their shoulders. Their identity was no longer defined by slavery or wilderness wandering. It was now defined by covenant. Shortly after, something else changed. While camped at Gilgal, Israel celebrated the Passover on the 14th day of the month in the evening. They ate produce from the land for the first time, roasted grain and unleavened bread. And the very next day, something astonishing happened. The manna stopped. After 40 years of daily provision, God was saying, "You no longer need wilderness food. You are home now. Eat from the land I've given you." Then, just before the Battle of Jericho began, something mysterious happened. Joshua was near Jericho, perhaps surveying the city, when he suddenly saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword. Joshua, being the soldier and leader he was, stepped up and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" But the answer stunned him. "Neither," the man replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come." This was no ordinary man. Joshua fell face down in reverence. "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" he asked. And the commander said, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." Just like Moses before the burning bush, Joshua now stood in the presence of divine authority. Before fighting Jericho, he had to kneel in surrender. Jericho was completely shut up. The gates were locked. The people inside lived in fear, not even daring to go outside. They had heard what happened at the Jordan, how the waters had stopped flowing. They had heard of the strength of Israel's God, and now Israel camped right outside their walls. From a human standpoint, the city was strong. Its high, thick walls were considered impenetrable. But God saw those walls differently. He spoke clearly to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, along with its king and its mighty men of valor." He spoke in the past tense. To God, the battle was already won. But what followed was not a normal military plan. God's strategy was spiritual, not tactical. He told Joshua, "March around the city once each day for 6 days. 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns ahead of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times. Then at the long blast of the trumpets have all the people shout, 'The wall will fall flat.'" Joshua didn't hesitate. He summoned the priests, gave them God's instructions, and organized the people. Early the next morning, the warriors led the procession. Behind them came the 7 priests, each holding a ram's horn. In the center of the formation was the Ark of the Covenant, carried reverently on the priests' shoulders. Behind the ark marched the rest of the army, but the most unusual order: silence. Joshua told the people, "Do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout." So they marched. Day 1, a silent circle around the city. The only sound was the steady marching of feet and the haunting cry of the trumpets. No battle cry, no noise from the soldiers, just movement. The people inside Jericho must have watched in growing confusion. Day 2 came, and again, just a quiet circle. Then day 3, and day 4. The routine continued. No words, no arrows, just steps and trumpets. It was psychological warfare, but more than that, it was obedience. God was breaking Jericho spiritually before he did so physically. Then came the 7th day. Before dawn, the Israelites rose. The formation took its place, and this time they marched 7 full laps around the city. By the end, the tension had built to a peak. After the 7th circle, Joshua gave the command, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." He reminded them, everything in the city is devoted to the Lord, except for Rahab and all in her house. Do not take anything for yourselves, or you will bring trouble on Israel. This was not about plunder. It was about holiness. Jericho was the first fruits of the land. It belonged fully to God. The priests blew the trumpets. The people shouted with everything in them, and suddenly the walls collapsed. Not one section, not one gate. The entire wall fell flat, just as God said. The people surged forward and took the city. They destroyed everything, man and woman, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkey. It was divine judgment, not human cruelty. This was God's cleansing of a deeply wicked nation that had resisted repentance for generations. Jericho's time had come. But in the midst of destruction, Rahab and her family were rescued. Joshua sent the 2 spies to bring them out. They were led to safety and placed outside the camp of Israel for purification. Her scarlet cord had marked her house for salvation, just as the blood of the Lamb had done in Egypt. Then Joshua gave one final command, a curse over the ruins of Jericho. Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city. At the cost of his firstborn he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest he will set up its gates. It was a warning. Jericho belonged to God. And the final line? So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. The victory at Jericho should have strengthened Israel. But beneath the celebration was a hidden sin, and God saw it. One man, Achan, son of Carmi, from the tribe of Judah, had taken what was forbidden, silver, gold, and a beautiful robe from Babylon. He hid them under his tent, thinking no one would know. But in God's covenant, hidden sin affects the whole body. Without knowing of the sin, Joshua prepared for the next campaign. Ai, a smaller city. He sent spies, and they returned with a confident report. Don't send everyone, just 2,000 or 3,000 men. It's a small place. So Joshua sent about 3,000 soldiers. But to everyone's shock, Israel was defeated. The men of Ai struck down 36 Israelites, chased the rest back down the slope, and Israel fled in confusion. Their confidence evaporated. Their hearts melted like water. Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down before the ark, along with the elders. He poured dust on his head in sorrow and confusion. "Why, Lord?" he cried. "Why did you bring us here just to let us fall? What will the Canaanites say? What about your great name?" God's answer came like thunder. "Stand up! Israel has sinned." The whole nation was guilty by association. God continued, "They have stolen, lied, and put the devoted things among their own belongings. That's why you can't stand before your enemies." Unless the sin was removed, God would not go with them. The next morning, the entire nation gathered for judgment, tribe by tribe, clan by clan, family by family. They were called forward. Finally, Achan was chosen by lot. Joshua confronted him gently but firmly. "My son, give glory to the Lord. Tell me what you've done." Achan confessed. "I saw a beautiful robe, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold. I coveted them and took them. They're buried under my tent." Men ran to his tent, dug beneath it, and found the stolen items. Joshua took Achan, his family, his livestock, and everything he owned to the valley of Acre, meaning trouble. There, the people of Israel stoned them, burned the bodies, and raised a pile of stones as a memorial of what hidden sin can cost. Then, and only then, did God's anger turn away. The valley would forever carry the name Acre, a warning and a reminder. After judgment came restoration. The Lord spoke to Joshua again, not in anger, but in reassurance. "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Take the whole army and go up against Ai, for I have given it into your hand." This time the strategy was different. Israel was allowed to take plunder, but they had to fight according to God's instructions. Joshua selected 30,000 warriors and sent them by night to set an ambush behind the city. Meanwhile, he led another group to approach from the front. It was a clever trap. When the king of Ai saw Joshua's forces, he rushed out to fight, just like before. He assumed this would be another easy win. But as he pursued Joshua's front line, he left the city completely undefended. At Joshua's signal, the ambush force rose, rushed into the city, and set it on fire. Smoke billowed into the sky. The army of Ai turned to see their city burning behind them. At the same time, Joshua turned and led his men back into battle. The army of Ai was trapped between two forces and was destroyed. 12,000 people of Ai, men and women, were killed that day. Not one was spared. The king of Ai was captured, hanged, and his body was taken down at sunset. His corpse was buried beneath a large pile of stones, another marker of judgment. But this chapter ends not in blood, but in worship. Joshua led the people north to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, just as Moses had instructed in Deuteronomy chapter 27. There, Joshua built an altar of uncut stones and offered sacrifices. Then, in front of all Israel, elders, officers, strangers, children, Joshua read aloud the entire law, every blessing, every curse, every command. No one was left out. Every ear heard the covenant again. And Israel stood renewed, not just as conquerors, but as a people of God. After the victories at Jericho and Ai, the reputation of Israel spread quickly throughout Canaan. The news of a people whose God dried up a river and brought down fortified walls with mere trumpet blasts was no longer just rumor. It was reality. The fall of Ai, especially after an initial defeat, demonstrated that this army was not simply relying on strategy or strength. There was divine backing behind them. The nations began to tremble. Their leaders, once confident in their city walls and military power, were now faced with something they had never encountered before, a spiritual force that no army could withstand. In response, all the kings west of the Jordan River, those in the hills, the plains, the coastlines near the Great Sea, and even the northern regions toward Lebanon, started to organize themselves. These kings represented major ethnic groups in the land: the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Many of them had rivalries and long-standing disputes, but now they chose unity over division. They saw Israel not just as another invading army, but as a serious threat to their survival. So they agreed to form a military alliance. It was the only way they believed they could stand a chance. However, one group chose a completely different path. The Gibeonites, who were part of the Hivite population, lived in a large and respected city. They were not weak. In fact, they were known for their strength and skills in warfare. But instead of joining the coalition of kings, they chose deception over confrontation. They recognized that what had happened to Jericho and Ai could easily happen to them. They decided to act quickly and cleverly. The Gibeonites crafted a plan. They wore old, torn clothing and patched sandals. Their bags carried dry and moldy bread. Their wineskins were cracked and worn out. Every piece of their appearance was deliberately made to look as though they had come from a very distant land. They wanted to look like travelers who had spent many days, maybe even weeks, on the road. Once they were ready, they journeyed to Gilgal, where the Israelites were camped. When they arrived, they approached Joshua and the leaders of Israel. Their message was direct: "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." It seemed like a simple request, but it was deeply strategic. They wanted a formal peace agreement, one that would legally protect them from destruction. The leaders of Israel were skeptical. They questioned the visitors, wondering if they might be locals in disguise. "What if you live near us?" they asked. "How can we make a treaty with our neighbors?" It was a valid concern, because Israel had been commanded by God not to make peace with the people living in the land of Canaan. They were to conquer it, not negotiate with it. But the Gibeonites remained committed to their story. They answered humbly, calling themselves servants. Joshua questioned them again. "Who are you and where do you come from?" He wanted to hear a more detailed answer. In response, they painted a picture of themselves as outsiders who had heard of the great acts of God. They spoke of what happened in Egypt and how God defeated Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites on the other side of the Jordan. These were events from the days of Moses. Significantly, they did not mention the recent victories at Jericho or Ai. That would have exposed them as locals who knew too much. They added that their leaders had instructed them to come and seek peace. They displayed their dry bread and cracked wineskins as proof. "This bread was fresh when we left," they claimed. "Now it's moldy." They pointed to their clothing and shoes. These were new, but look at them now. Everything they presented was designed to reinforce their lie. The Israelites examined the evidence. They saw the bread, the clothing, the sandals, everything looked consistent with a long journey. But then came the critical moment. Joshua. Chapter 9, verse 14 says, "The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord." This was the mistake. They evaluated the situation using their senses and their judgment, but they failed to ask God for direction. That decision changed everything. Trusting their own reasoning, Joshua and the leaders of Israel made a peace treaty with the Gibeonites. They swore an oath, making it official and unbreakable. The treaty protected the Gibeonites from harm. For the moment, everything seemed settled. 3 days later, the truth surfaced. As the Israelites continued their journey, they came upon the cities of Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. These places were right there in the land they were meant to conquer. The supposed distant travelers were actually neighbors. They had not crossed deserts or wilderness. They had simply walked over from nearby towns. The Israelites were shocked. They had been deceived. The people began to grumble against the leaders. Why had they been fooled? Why had they sworn an oath without checking with God? Many wanted to undo the treaty and attack the Gibeonites, but the leaders held firm. They said, "We have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now." Though the agreement had been based on a lie, it was still a sacred promise. So the leaders devised a compromise. They would honor the treaty, but place the Gibeonites in a position of servitude. The people would not be destroyed, but they would be given a life of service. Specifically, they would become woodcutters and water carriers for the entire assembly of Israel. This was not meant as a blessing, it was a consequence. They would survive, but they would not have freedom. Joshua called the Gibeonites and confronted them. "Why did you lie to us?" he asked. "You said you were from far away, but you live nearby. Now you are cursed. You will never be free from your role as servants." He made it clear that their deception had consequences, even though their lives were spared. This time, the Gibeonites answered with honesty. They said they knew what God had commanded, that the land would be given to Israel and its people would be wiped out. They admitted that they were terrified and believed deception was the only way to survive. "We feared for our lives," they said. "That's why we acted this way." It wasn't pride or evil intent. It was fear and desperation. They submitted completely. "Do to us whatever seems good and right to you," they told Joshua. They accepted their fate without protest. They had lied, but now they were ready to serve. Joshua upheld the treaty. He did not break his word, even though it was made under false pretenses. But he did not forget the deception either. He placed the Gibeonites in permanent service as woodcutters and water carriers, especially for the worship at the house of God. This role was not temporary. Scripture ends the chapter with a clear statement, and that is what they are to this day. Their place in Israel's history was secured, not as warriors or rulers, but as servants living under a treaty they had cunningly secured. When news of Israel's unstoppable victories reached the ears of Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, fear took hold of him. He had heard the full report. Joshua had captured Ai and destroyed it completely, doing to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. But what disturbed him most was that Gibeon, a large, fortified city known for its strong warriors, had made peace with Israel and was now living under their protection. Gibeon's surrender without resistance shocked the entire region. If a strong city like that had given in, then surely Israel's power was beyond normal. Adoni-Zedek sensed that unless something drastic was done, his kingdom would be next. Instead of waiting for Israel to come, Adoni-Zedek chose to strike first, but not against Israel. His anger was aimed at Gibeon. He quickly sent messengers to 4 other kings, Hoham of Hebron, Piram of Jarmuth, Japhia of Lachish, and Debir of Eglon. His message was urgent. They must attack Gibeon together. The alliance was formed not out of friendship, but out of fear and fury. These 5 Amorite kings united their armies and marched toward Gibeon, determined to punish the city for siding with Israel. Their goal was to make an example out of Gibeon so that no other city would dare to follow its path. Realizing the danger they were in, the people of Gibeon sent messengers to Joshua at Gilgal. Their cry for help was direct and desperate. "Do not abandon your servants," they pleaded. "Come quickly and save us. All the Amorite kings from the hill country have united against us." Gibeon had relied on the treaty they made with Israel, and now they were calling in that promise. This was a moment of testing. Joshua could have refused to help them, citing the trickery that led to their alliance, but he didn't. Joshua honored the covenant, and more importantly, he recognized that God was at work even in this unexpected situation. Joshua responded with swift action. He mobilized the entire army, including all his best warriors, and began a night march toward Gibeon. The terrain was rough and the climb was steep, but there was no time to waste. During this march, God spoke clearly to Joshua. "Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to stand against you." These words gave Joshua confidence. God had already declared the outcome. The victory was guaranteed. At dawn, Israel launched a surprise attack on the Amorite alliance. The enemy forces were caught completely off guard. Panic spread through their camp as Israel advanced swiftly and struck them with force. As the enemy soldiers fled, Israel pursued them down the road that led from Beth Horon. But this battle was not fought by human strength alone. As the Amorites ran, God hurled large hailstones from the sky. These were not ordinary hailstones, they were deadly. In fact, more soldiers died from the hail than by the swords of Israel. Nature itself became a weapon in God's hands. As the battle raged on, Joshua saw that time was running out. The sun was beginning to set, and darkness would allow the remaining enemy soldiers to escape. In a moment of bold faith, Joshua prayed publicly before all Israel. He called out, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Ajalon." And incredibly, the sun stopped in the sky. The day stretched longer than usual. Time paused. This gave Israel the opportunity to continue the battle and completely defeat their enemies. Scripture says there has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a divine demonstration. God was actively fighting for his people, and everyone who saw it knew that this was no ordinary day. When the battle finally ended, Joshua and his army returned to their camp at Gilgal. But the 5 kings had not died in the fight. They had escaped and hidden themselves in a cave at Makkedah. When Joshua was told of their location, he gave a quick order: block the cave entrance with large stones and post guards to ensure they stayed trapped. But he didn't allow the army to rest. He commanded them to continue pursuing the fleeing soldiers. "Don't stop," he said. "Keep pressing the attack. Don't let them reach their cities." Joshua understood that unfinished battles lead to future threats. Israel followed his command and chased down the remaining enemy troops. Few of them survived. When the army regrouped, there was peace throughout the camp. No one dared to speak against Israel now. Then Joshua turned his attention back to the cave. He ordered the stones to be rolled away and had the 5 kings brought out in front of the entire assembly. This was not done in secret. It was a public moment. Joshua then called his military commanders and had them come forward. He told them to place their feet on the necks of the kings. This act was a symbolic declaration that victory had been given by God. It was not arrogance. It was a reminder that no enemy could stand against the Lord's will. Joshua encouraged his men by saying, "Do not be afraid or discouraged. Be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all your enemies." After this, Joshua killed the 5 kings. He executed them and hung their bodies on trees until evening. At sunset, he commanded that their bodies be taken down and thrown into the very cave where they had hidden. Large stones were rolled in front of the cave once more, sealing it as their grave. It stood as a warning and a memory of what had happened. But the conquest was not yet finished. Joshua led Israel from Makkedah to Libnah. They attacked the city, killed its king, and left no one alive. Then they moved to Lachish. They surrounded the city and launched an attack. On the 2nd day, God gave them victory. Lachish fell, and all its people were destroyed. When Horam, king of Gezer, came to help Lachish, he and his army were also defeated and wiped out. Next came Eglon. Israel captured it on the same day they arrived. Everyone in the city was killed. From there, they went to Hebron. The city and its surrounding villages were all conquered. Joshua and his men left no survivors. Then they advanced to Debir. The pattern continued. The city, its people, and its king were all destroyed. Joshua followed through with complete obedience. This southern campaign was thorough and unstoppable. Joshua conquered the hill country, the western foothills, the desert areas, and the mountain slopes. He defeated every king and took every city. The scripture says that Joshua did this in one continuous campaign because God was fighting for Israel. Joshua didn't hesitate or hold back. He followed every instruction given to him. The chapter concludes with a powerful summary. Joshua subdued all the territory from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and from the entire region of Goshen to Gibeon. Every king, every land, every stronghold was brought under Israel's control. And when the battles of the south were finished, Joshua and all Israel returned to their camp at Gilgal, carrying the memory of victory and the assurance that God was with them. After the intense and successful southern campaign, Israel's fame continued to spread beyond the regions they had conquered. Far in the north, the most powerful ruler in that area, Jabin, king of Hazor, took notice. Hazor was not just another city. It was considered a royal stronghold, a capital that had influence over many surrounding territories. If there was any leader in the north who could rally a significant force against Israel, it was Jabin. And he knew that if he didn't act soon, Israel's army would be knocking on his gates. When Jabin heard that Joshua had captured Jericho, and now the entire southern hill country, he saw that this was no small movement. It was a sweeping conquest, backed by a power unlike anything he had seen. Jabin realized that if he waited too long, his kingdom would fall just like the others. So he began forming a massive alliance, larger and more diverse than any seen before. He sent word to Jobab, king of Madon, and to the kings of Shimron and Akshaph. His invitation stretched even further, reaching kings across the northern mountains, down through the Arabah region south of Kinnereth, into the western foothills, and all the way west to Naphoth Dor. Jabin's alliance included people from different directions and backgrounds: Canaanites from the east and west, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites in the highlands, and Hivites near Mount Hermon in the land of Mizpah. This coalition was more than just a military force. It was a network of kingdoms with one shared objective: stop Israel before they reached the north. These kings gathered together, each bringing their full armies, and they met at the waters of Merom to prepare for war. The army they assembled was unlike any Israel had faced before. Scripture describes them as numerous as the sand on the seashore. For the first time, Israel's enemies came with horses and chariots, powerful tools of war that could give them a serious advantage. In those days, horses and chariots were the most advanced military technology available. It looked as though Israel was outnumbered and outgunned, but their strength was never in numbers or equipment. Before Joshua engaged this enormous army, the Lord came to him again. He said, "Do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them over to Israel, slain. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." Not only was God promising victory, but he was also giving instructions to eliminate the enemy's military power permanently. By hamstringing the horses, Israel ensured they would never be used in battle again. By burning the chariots, they removed the temptation of adopting foreign strategies. Israel's trust was to remain in God, not in military strength. So Joshua launched a sudden attack at the waters of Merom. Once again, the element of surprise worked in their favor. God caused confusion to break out among the enemy ranks, and Israel swept through them. The enemy fled in all directions, toward Sidon, Misrephoth-Maim, and the valley of Mizpah to the east. The Israelites pursued them relentlessly and struck them down as they ran. There was no pause and no mercy, just as the Lord had commanded. After crushing the armies, Joshua went straight to the source of the rebellion, Hazor. He captured the city and killed its king. Hazor was burned to the ground. This was different from most other cities Israel conquered, which were not set on fire. Hazor was singled out, likely because it had initiated the northern resistance and represented a central threat. Its destruction sent a clear message that rebellion against God's people would not stand. Joshua then turned to the other cities whose kings had joined Jabin. He attacked each one, leaving no survivors. Every king was struck down. Joshua followed the exact instructions given to him, carrying out the commands that had been passed down from Moses. His actions were not fueled by personal ambition. They were acts of obedience to the will of God. Most of the cities were not burned, except for Hazor. Israel took livestock and valuable goods from these towns, but they put every person to death. Nothing that breathed was spared. It was a complete judgment carried out through Joshua's leadership. The Bible states clearly that Joshua left nothing undone. Every instruction from God was fulfilled fully and without compromise. The chapter then expands the view, summarizing the entire extent of Joshua's campaign. He had taken the hill country, the Negev desert, the entire region of Goshen, the western foothills, the lowlands, and the mountain regions of Israel. The conquest stretched from Mount Halak near Edom in the south, all the way north to Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon beneath Mount Hermon. No region was untouched. Joshua captured every king and put them to death. This campaign was not quick. Scripture points out that Joshua fought these battles over a long period. It was a process that required consistency, endurance, and total faithfulness to the task. Of all the cities Israel encountered, only the people of Gibeon made peace. The rest chose to fight and were defeated in battle. There is a striking statement in the passage that says, "It was the Lord himself who hardened their hearts to wage war against Israel." This means that God allowed these nations to resist, knowing it would lead to their downfall. Their actions brought judgment upon themselves. It was not by accident, it was the result of long-standing rebellion and corruption. Their opportunity to change had passed, and now justice was unfolding. Joshua also dealt with another threat, the Anakites. These were the people known for their size and strength, giant warriors who had terrified others in the past. Joshua cut them off from the hill country, wiping them out from Hebron, Debir, Anab, and the hill country of Judah and Israel. Only a few remained in the Philistine cities of Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. These remnants would later appear in future conflicts, but for now they had been removed from the land. With every enemy defeated and the northern campaign complete, Joshua finally took possession of the entire land, just as the Lord had promised. He divided it among the tribes of Israel, assigning each group its inheritance. At last, the long journey of battle and conquest came to a pause. The chapter closes with these simple and powerful words, "And then the land had rest from war." Before the narrative moves forward into the distribution of the land, the book of Joshua takes a deliberate pause. This chapter is not just a break in the story, it is a moment of reflection. It lists one by one every king and kingdom that had been conquered through the leadership of Moses and Joshua. But this is not just a record for the sake of memory. Each name stands as a reminder. Each line echoes the victories. Together they form a testimony to the power of God and the fulfillment of his promises. The chapter begins by recounting the victories that happened before Israel crossed the Jordan River, those won under the leadership of Moses. The first was Sihon, the king of the Amorites. He ruled from the city of Heshbon. His kingdom stretched from Aroer, located near the edge of the Arnon River, up to the Jabbok River, which marked the border of the Ammonites. His domain wasn't small. It reached from the flatlands of the eastern Arabah all the way to the Sea of Galilee. Next was Og, the king of Bashan. He was one of the last known Rephaim, giant warriors feared by many. Og ruled from the cities of Ashtaroth and Edrei. His territory spanned the entire region of Bashan. It extended north to Mount Hermon, eastward to Salakah, and down to the areas occupied by the Geshurites and Maacathites. These regions were well defended and deeply rooted in their own military strength, yet they fell before Moses and the people. These two kings, Sihon and Og, were not just footnotes in history. Their defeat marked the first major shift in territorial control. Their lands were later assigned to the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Before ever stepping into the promised land west of the Jordan, Israel had already begun to see God's hand clearing the way. Then the chapter turns its focus to Joshua. What follows is a precise, name-by-name account of the kings Joshua had defeated after crossing the Jordan. These victories were not from long ago. They were fresh and unforgettable. Each name was connected to a battle, a city, and a moment when resistance collapsed before God's presence. The list begins with the king of Jericho, where the walls fell after silent marches and trumpet blasts. Then came the king of Ai, near Bethel, where Israel first faced defeat but then returned with a divinely guided strategy. Next was the king of Jerusalem, followed by Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, cities involved in the five-king alliance that attacked Gibeon and were crushed in a single, extended battle under the sun that stood still. Then came the king of Gezer, the king of Debir, and the king of Geder. Each of these had stood strong in their own region, fortified and confident. But none could stop what God was doing. One by one, their names were added to the list of fallen kings. The list continues. Hormah, Arad, Libnah, Adullam, Makkedah, Bethel, Tappuah, Hepher, Aphek, and Lasharon. These names once represented strongholds, cities with high walls and kings with seasoned armies. But they, too, had been conquered. Then the kings of Madon and Hazor appear, key cities from the northern coalition that had gathered like a storm at the waters of Merom. Along with them came the kings of Shimron-Meron and Akshaph. These northern cities formed the largest alliance Israel had faced, and yet their chariots burned and their armies scattered. The list marches on. Taanach, Megiddo, Kadesh, Jokneam and Carmel, Dor and Naphoth Dor, Goyim and Gilgal, and Tirzah. 31 kings in all. Each one had once sat on a throne, confident in their defenses and alliances. Each one had raised weapons, commanded troops, and refused to yield. But not one remained standing. This chapter is more than a historical account. It is a declaration. Each king represents a fulfilled promise. Each defeated city reflects a moment when the power of God triumphed over opposition. The victories were not because Israel had better weapons or stronger warriors. They won because God was with them. He gave the land, He gave the strength, He gave the victories. And so as the list ends with the total 31 kings defeated west of the Jordan, it stands not as a list of conquests, but as a monument of faith. It tells anyone reading, God finishes what He starts. He doesn't speak in empty words. What He promised, He delivered. After years of battle and major victories, Israel stood at a turning point. The land had been subdued through war, but it had not yet been fully claimed. Joshua, now an old man, received a personal message from God. The Lord said, "You are now very old, and there are still very large areas of land to be taken over." This wasn't spoken as criticism. It was a clear instruction. The work was not done. While much had been conquered, large territories, especially along the coast and in the northern regions, remained untouched. God listed the lands that were still outside Israel's control. There was the entire region ruled by the Philistines along the western shoreline. These included the 5 major Philistine cities: Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. Each city had its own ruler, and these lords would play significant roles in future conflicts. Alongside them lived the Avites, another coastal people group. Further north was the land of the Canaanites, stretching from Arah of the Sidonians all the way to Aphek, near the Amorite frontier. Then came the territory of the Gebalites and the broad expanse of Lebanon, from Baal Gad, below Mount Hermon, up to Lebo Hamath. The highlands of Lebanon all the way to Misrephoth Maim were still inhabited by the Sidonians. This was rugged land, but it had not yet been brought under Israel's control. Yet even as God described the remaining land, he gave Joshua a promise: I myself will drive them out before the Israelites. Though Joshua would not live to lead every campaign, God's hand would remain on the mission. So the command was given. Joshua was to divide the land among the tribes. The shift had begun. The sword would give way to settlement. Israel was moving from battle into inheritance. The process began with the land already taken on the eastern side of the Jordan River, the land captured during Moses' leadership. These territories were already promised to the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Their inheritance stretched from Aroer, near the Arnon Gorge, and included the towns along the Central Valley and the plateau of Medeba, reaching all the way to Dibon. This region included the domain of Sihon, the former king of the Amorites, who had ruled from Heshbon and held land up to the Ammonite border. It covered Gilead and stretched into the lands of the Geshurites and Maacathites. It climbed to Mount Hermon and reached through Bashan to Salakah, territory that once belonged to Og, king of Bashan. Og had ruled from Ashtaroth and Edrei and was known as one of the last giants of his time. His defeat by Moses had opened the way for these eastern tribes to settle. However, not everything had been fully cleansed. The Israelites had not driven out the Geshurites and Maacathites entirely. These people continued to live among Israel, serving as a reminder of what incomplete obedience leaves behind. The land divisions were carefully described. The tribe of Reuben received the region around Heshbon, along with towns like Dibon, Bamath Baal, Beth Baal Meon, Jahaz, Kedemoth, Mephath, Kiriathaim, Sibma, Zareth Shahar, and Beth Peor. Their borders included the slopes of Pisgah and Beth Jeshimoth and stopped at the Jordan River. Gad's inheritance included Jazer, all of Gilead, and part of the Ammonite territory, stretching as far as Aroer near Rabbah. Their land included Heshbon and the plateau cities, Mahanaim, Beth Nimrah, Beth Horon, and the fertile valley stretching towards Succoth and Zaphon, reaching to the Sea of Galilee and the edge of Mount Hermon. The half-tribe of Manasseh received a portion of Gilead and the entirety of Bashan, the former kingdom of Og. This included the villages of Jair, named after a warrior of Manasseh who had taken them. Their land also included Mahanaim and the cities of Ashtaroth and Edrei. All these eastern allotments were made by Moses while Israel was still encamped in the plains of Moab, across the Jordan from Jericho. But the Levites were set apart. They received no tribal inheritance of land. Their portion was different. It came from the offerings made by fire to the Lord, the God of Israel. Their calling was sacred and their inheritance was spiritual. As Israel turned its attention west of the Jordan, the leaders came together at Shiloh. This was a defining moment, Eleazar the priest, Joshua son of Nun, and the tribal leaders gathered to oversee the distribution. The land would be divided by casting lots, following the Lord's instruction given through Moses. This method ensured fairness and acknowledged that God was directing the outcome. Every tribe received its portion, except the Levites, who were instead given cities and surrounding pasture lands. Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, were treated as two tribes. At this point, a familiar and faithful man stepped forward, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite. He approached Joshua at Gilgal with a personal request. "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, about you and me at Kadesh Barnea," he began. Caleb, now 85 years old, spoke with confidence and strength. He reminded Joshua of the moment 45 years earlier when both of them had been sent as spies into the land. While others had brought back fearful reports, Caleb had remained confident that God would give them the land. He had spoken with boldness when others had faltered. He said, "I followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Moses told me that the land my feet had walked on would one day be my inheritance." Caleb had waited nearly half a century for this moment. Now he stood before Joshua, not asking for ease but for challenge. "Give me this hill country," he said, "the one the Lord promised me. The Anakites are there, and their cities are large and fortified, but with the Lord helping me, I will drive them out." Joshua did not hesitate. He blessed Caleb and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. The scriptures are clear. Hebron became his because he had followed the Lord with all his heart. At that time, Hebron was still known as Kiriath Arba, named after the greatest of the Anakites, but Caleb's faith would conquer that name. And with this, the land once again had rest from war. The first tribe to receive its portion west of the Jordan was Judah. Their inheritance was determined by lot. As the most prominent tribe, Judah received a large section of the southern land. Their borders were wide and detailed. Their southern boundary began at the edge of Edom, through the desert of Zin, reaching Kadesh Barnea, Hezron, Adar, and Karka. It turned toward Asmon and ran along the brook of Egypt until it reached the Mediterranean Sea. To the east, their boundary was the entire length of the Dead Sea. The northern boundary traced from the northern tip of the Dead Sea, passing through towns like Beth Hogla, Beth Araba, the Stone of Bohan, through Debir, and up to the valley of Acher and Gilgal. It continued through En-Shemesh and Rogel and climbed through various mountain passes, eventually reaching Kiriath Baal. The western edge of Judah's land was the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. This territory was vast and rich, containing wilderness, fertile plains, and mountain strongholds. The focus then shifts again to Caleb. Having received Hebron, he wasted no time. He drove out the 3 Anakite warriors who lived there, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai. These were men known for their size and strength, but Caleb overcame them with courage and faith. From Hebron, Caleb moved against the city of Debir. He issued a challenge. "Whoever captures Debir, I will give my daughter Aksah in marriage." Othniel, his nephew, rose to the task and captured the city. True to his word, Caleb gave him Aksah as his wife. Later, she approached her father and requested additional land. Caleb honored her request and gave her both the upper and lower springs, an act of generosity and provision. The rest of the chapter details the towns within Judah's territory, organized by region. Over 100 towns are listed, spanning from the desert regions of the Negev to the hills and coastal plains. Familiar names appear, such as Bethlehem, Tekoa, Ziph, Maon, Hebron, and En-Gedi. These towns would later carry great historical and spiritual importance. But the chapter ends with a crucial detail. Judah could not dislodge the Jebusites living in Jerusalem. To this day they live there with the people of Judah. Even with all their strength, the Jebusites held on to Jerusalem. The city remained outside of full Israelite control, a task that would wait for another time. As the division of the land continued, the focus shifted to the descendants of Joseph. Though Joseph himself was not listed as a tribe, his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, had been granted full status as tribal leaders. This unique blessing, given by Jacob, meant that Joseph's lineage received a double portion of land. The Josephites were next in line to claim their inheritance after Judah. Their assigned territory began at the Jordan River near Jericho. From there, the land climbed westward through the wilderness into the hill country. The boundary stretched from Jericho to Bethel, passing through Luz, which was another name for Bethel. It continued to Ataroth, then moved westward through the lands of the Japhletites, past Lower Beth Horon, and extended all the way to Gezer, ending at the Mediterranean Sea. This wide stretch of land belonged to the people of Joseph, a broad central territory that reached from the eastern riverbanks to the western coastline. The land was fertile and geographically strategic, positioned in the heart of Canaan. It fulfilled the blessing spoken over Joseph, that he would be fruitful and possess abundance. Within this larger region, the first specific allotment was given to Ephraim, the younger of Joseph's sons. Even though he was younger than Manasseh, Ephraim received the greater blessing. His inheritance came first. The chapter notes that Ephraim was given specific towns and villages within the shared region carved out distinctly for their tribe. However, one issue remained unresolved. In Joshua chapter 16, verse 10, it is written that the people of Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer. Instead of removing them as God had instructed, they allowed the Canaanites to remain in the land and subjected them to forced labor. This decision, though practical in the short term, reflected incomplete obedience. It would not be without consequences in the future. Attention then turned to the tribe of Manasseh, the older son of Joseph. Though Ephraim's inheritance was given first, Manasseh was also entitled to a large and separate portion. The tribe of Manasseh had already been divided into two halves, those who settled east of the Jordan and those who would now take land to the west. Machir, the firstborn son of Manasseh, had already received his portion east of the Jordan. He had distinguished himself as a warrior and had taken the regions of Gilead and Bashan. Therefore, his inheritance had been secured earlier. The rest of the tribe, the descendants of the other sons, would now receive their portion west of the Jordan. 6 male family groups from the tribe of Manasseh were each given territory. These clans were Abiezer, Helek, Asriel, Shechem, Hepher, and Shemitah. Their lands were distributed by casting lots, following the command that had come through Moses and was now being carried out by Joshua. Then the story paused to highlight a unique and courageous moment. It focused on the daughters of Zelophehad. Zelophehad was a descendant of Hepher, and he had no sons, only 5 daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. These women had already stepped forward years earlier during Moses' time, as recorded in the book of Numbers chapter 27. Back then they had boldly asked for an inheritance among their father's relatives. Moses had sought God's guidance, and God affirmed that their request was right. Now, as the land was being divided, the daughters came again, this time to Joshua, Eleazar the priest, and the tribal leaders. They said, "The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our relatives." Their claim was not based on emotion or pleading, but on the clear command of God. Joshua honored their request. They were given an inheritance among their father's relatives, setting a significant legal and spiritual precedent. Their story became a lasting example of how God values justice, honors faith, and provides for all his people, regardless of tradition. The narrative then returns to Manasseh's larger boundaries. Their territory stretched from the region of Asher to Mikmethath, east of Shechem, and extended south to En-Tappuah. However, although the town of Tappuah was inside Manasseh's border, it belonged to Ephraim. This kind of overlap was not unusual, especially for the tribes of Joseph, whose land was interwoven. The land of Manasseh continued west, to the Kana ravine. The towns near the ravine were Ephraim's, but the territory itself marked part of Manasseh's boundary. The southern side was Ephraim's, and the northern part was Manasseh's. The boundary ran to the Mediterranean Sea. To the northwest, Manasseh bordered Asher. To the northeast, Issachar. Within the territories of Issachar and Asher, Manasseh owned several important cities. These included Beth-shan, Iblim, Dor, Endor, Tanach, and Megiddo. Each of these towns had surrounding villages and trade routes, showing how influential Manasseh's territory had become, especially in strategic and economic terms. Yet again, a familiar pattern emerged. Just like Ephraim, the tribe of Manasseh did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in those cities. Instead, they let them stay and later subjected them to forced labor. While this may have seemed convenient, it was not complete obedience to God's command. The consequences of leaving these people in the land would surface in later generations. Soon after, a moment of conflict and concern arose. The people of Joseph, both Ephraim and Manasseh, came to Joshua with a complaint. They said, "Why have you given us only one allotment and one portion for an inheritance? We are a numerous people, and the Lord has blessed us greatly." They believed their population size justified a larger share of land. Joshua listened carefully and responded with firmness. He told them, "If you are so numerous, go up into the forest and clear land for yourselves in the territory of the Perizzites and Rephites." Joshua wasn't refusing their request. He was challenging their willingness to act. If they needed more space, they had to go and make it usable. Still, the people of Joseph hesitated. They replied, "The hill country is not enough for us, and the Canaanites who live in the plains have iron chariots, both those in Beth-shan and in the valley of Jezreel." They were overwhelmed by the strength of their enemies and the difficulty of clearing forested land. But Joshua answered them again, this time with strong encouragement. "You are numerous and very powerful," he said. "You will have not only one allotment, but the hill country as well. Clear it, and it will be yours. Yes, the Canaanites have iron chariots and are strong, but you can drive them out." It was a message that required faith and boldness. Joshua reminded them that the promise of God wasn't limited by the size of their enemy. If they truly wanted more land, they had to rise up and take it with courage. Their destiny was not in the hands of the Canaanites. It was in their willingness to trust and act. By this point, Israel had gained control of much of the land, and the time came to establish a central location for worship and leadership. The entire Israelite community gathered at Shiloh, nestled in the hill country of Ephraim. There they set up the tent of meeting, the same sacred tabernacle they had carried through the wilderness. This moment marked a major transition. Shiloh would now serve as the heart of spiritual and civic life. Worship, sacrifices, and decisions would now be rooted in one place. Though many battles had ended and large areas were already claimed, 7 of the tribes still had not received their inheritance. The initial pace of conquest had slowed. People were settling but not fully stepping into the complete promise. Joshua saw this delay and called the people to account. He asked, "How long will you wait before you begin to take possession of the land the Lord has given you?" His words were not harsh, but urgent. The land had already been given. It was time to rise and walk in that promise. To get things moving, Joshua gave instructions. He told them to appoint 3 men from each of the 7 remaining tribes. These men were to go throughout the land, carefully surveying it, writing down descriptions town by town. With this report, Joshua would then cast lots and assign portions to each tribe in the presence of the Lord at Shiloh. Joshua also reminded them that Judah had already settled in the south and the house of Joseph in the north. The Levites would receive no tribal territory, as their role was to serve the Lord as priests. Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh had already received land east of the Jordan River. The appointed men did as they were told. They traveled, observed, recorded, and returned to Joshua with their detailed report. Then at Shiloh, in the presence of God, Joshua cast lots to assign the remaining territories to the 7 tribes. The first lot was for the tribe of Benjamin. Their inheritance lay between Judah and Joseph. Their territory stretched from the Jordan River past the slopes of Jericho westward through the hill country. It curved around Bethel, Adaroth, and Beth Araba, and reached as far west as Kiriath Jearim. The cities included Jericho, Beth Hogla, Emek Keziz, Avim, Para, Ophrah, Geba, and a total of 12 towns with surrounding villages. Benjamin's land also included Jerusalem's territory, although the Jebusites still occupied the city. Their inheritance also included Gibeon, Mizpah, Kephirah, and Mozah, bringing the total to 26 towns. With this, the tribe of Benjamin received its full allotment, clearly marked and named. Next, the second lot was drawn for Simeon. Their portion was unique. It was located within Judah's territory. Judah had received more than enough land, so a part of their portion was given to Simeon. Their inheritance included towns such as Beersheba, Moladah, Hazar-Shual, Bala, Ezem, and Ziklag. In total, 13 towns and their surrounding villages formed their core region. In addition to those, they were also given Ain, Rimmon, Ether, and Ashan, 4 more towns. It was said, "The inheritance of Simeon was taken from the share of Judah, because Judah's portion was more than they needed." It was a practical and generous arrangement that strengthened unity between the tribes. The third lot went to Zebulun. Their territory extended as far as Sarid. From there, the border stretched west to Maralah and Dabbesheth, near the ravine by Jokneam. Then it curved eastward toward Kisloth Tabor, reached Daberath and Japhiah, passed through Gath Hefer and Eth-Kazin, and ended at Rimmon and Neah. Their towns included Katath, Nahalal, Shimron, Idalah, and Bethlehem, not the one in Judah, but a town within Zebulun. Altogether, Zebulun had 12 towns and their surrounding villages. The fourth lot went to Issachar. Their territory included fertile and strategic cities like Jezreel, Shunem, Hapharaim, and Anaharath. Other towns included Rabbath, Kishion, Ebez, Remeth, En-Ganim, and Beth Pazez. Their land reached toward Tabor and Beth Shemesh, ending at the Jordan River. Issachar was assigned 16 towns with villages, settled in rich valleys and plains. The fifth lot was for Asher. Their boundary passed through towns like Helkath, Hali, Beton, Akshaph, and Alamelech. It stretched to Carmel, past Shihor-Libnath, and turned east to Beth Dagon. The boundary touched Zebulun, passed through the valley of Iftahel, and included cities like Abdon, Rehob, Haman, and Kana. Their land reached up to the fortified city of Tyre and the Mediterranean Sea. This inheritance placed Asher near important trade centers and fertile coastal plains. The sixth lot went to Naphtali. Their territory began at Heleph, passed through Zaanannim, and reached Adaminekeb and Jabneel, ending at the Jordan River. Towns included Ziddim, Zer, Hamath, Rakath, Chinnereth, Adamah, Ramah, Hazor, Kadesh, Edrei, En-Hazor, Iron, Migdal-El, Horem, Beth-Anath, and Beth-Shemesh, 19 towns in total, surrounded by rolling hills and lake shores. The seventh and final lot was drawn for Dan. Their territory included towns like Zorah, Eshtaol, Ir-Shemesh, Aijalon, Timnah, Ekron, and Gath-Rimmon. The land reached near the coast, with access to Joppa, but their original inheritance was not enough. So the people of Dan went north and attacked the city of Leshem. They captured it, renamed it Dan, and settled there, expanding beyond their assigned portion. After all the tribes received their land, Joshua himself stepped forward. He had waited until every tribe had been provided for. The people of Israel granted him the town he requested, Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim. Joshua rebuilt it and made it his home. With that, the division of the land came to a close. Everything had been done at Shiloh, in the presence of the Lord, before the tent of meeting. But God was not finished speaking. The Lord reminded Joshua of an important task: appoint the cities of refuge. These cities were part of a system of justice and mercy. If someone accidentally killed another person without hatred or intent, they could flee to a city of refuge and be protected from retaliation until a proper trial could be held. Joshua named 6 cities for this purpose: Kadesh in Galilee, in the territory of Naphtali; Shechem, in the hill country of Ephraim; Hebron, also known as Kiriath Arba, in Judah's hill country, east of the Jordan, from the land already assigned by Moses; Bezer, in the desert plateau of Reuben; Ramoth, in Gilead, for the tribe of Gad; Golan, in Bashan, for the half-tribe of Manasseh. These cities were open to everyone, Israelites and foreigners alike. No one could be harmed until they stood before the community for judgment. The system balanced justice with mercy, preventing revenge-driven violence and ensuring that every person had a chance to be heard. Then the Levites came forward. Unlike the other tribes, they were not given a large portion of land. Their inheritance was different. God had appointed cities and pasture lands for them. The heads of the Levite families approached Eleazar the priest, Joshua, and the leaders, saying, "The Lord commanded through Moses that we be given towns to live in, with pasture lands for our animals." The people of Israel honored that command. From each tribe's inheritance, towns were selected by lot and given to the Levites, 48 in total, each with surrounding pasture lands. The Kohathites, descendants of Aaron the priest, received 13 towns in Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin. This included Hebron, which served as both a Levitical city and a city of refuge. Other Kohathite clans received towns in Ephraim, Dan, and the western portion of Manasseh. The Gershonites were given towns in Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and the eastern part of Manasseh. The Merarites, the third major Levite group, received towns in Zebulun, Reuben, and Gad. Each Levite group received exactly what had been promised. Their towns were scattered throughout the entire land, ensuring that spiritual guidance and priestly presence were available in every region. These were not just cities, they were centers of teaching, worship, and justice. And so the book states in closing, "The Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give. Not one of all the Lord's good promises failed. Every one was fulfilled." After years of war and victories that reshaped the land, the moment finally came for the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh to return to their homes. These were the tribes whose inheritance lay east of the Jordan River, land granted to them during the leadership of Moses. Yet despite receiving their territory early, their fighting men had crossed over with the rest of Israel, standing shoulder to shoulder in battle, fulfilling a promise they had made. Their families remained in Gilead, but their hearts stayed with their brothers in the fight. Now that the battles were mostly behind them and the land was largely secured, Joshua called the warriors from these tribes together. He looked at them with deep respect and blessed them. His words were not rushed or casual. He said, "You have done everything that Moses commanded. You have obeyed me in all I asked. You stayed with your brothers until the work was done." Joshua honored their commitment. They had fought not only for their own land, but for the good of the entire nation. It was time for them to go home. But before they turned back toward the east, Joshua gave them one final instruction. Something more important than swords or borders, he said, "Be very careful to keep the command and the law that Moses gave you. To love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to obey his commands, to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and soul." It was a reminder that the land could be lost if they abandoned the one who gave it. Loyalty to God would be the only way to remain secure. Joshua then blessed them again and sent them off with great wealth: livestock, silver, gold, bronze, iron, and clothing. These were the rewards of battles they had fought with courage and unity. He told them to divide this bounty with the families waiting for them east of the river. As the warriors crossed the Jordan back into their land, something unexpected happened. Near the riverbank, they stopped and built an altar. But this wasn't a small structure. It was enormous, visible from a great distance. When the rest of the Israelite tribes heard about it, alarm spread quickly. Word traveled through the land. "Look, the tribes on the east have built a giant altar by the Jordan." To the western tribes, this seemed like a betrayal. God had clearly commanded that offerings and sacrifices be made only at the tabernacle, which was now in Shiloh. This altar looked like the beginning of a rival religion, a breach of the covenant. Fear of divine judgment filled their hearts. They had just finished years of battle, and now they were ready to go to war again, this time against their own people. But instead of rushing into conflict, the leaders paused and sent a delegation. Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, led the group. Alongside him were 10 representatives, one from each of the remaining tribes. They traveled east, confronted the Reubenites, Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and spoke with serious concern. They said, "How could you turn away from the Lord so quickly? Don't you remember what happened at Peor when sin brought a plague upon us? Why are you risking God's wrath again?" They even offered an alternative. "If your land feels distant or defiled, come live with us in the land of the Lord. But don't build your altar. Don't rebel." The response from the eastern tribes was immediate and heartfelt. They cried out, "The mighty one God, the Lord, he knows our hearts. Let all Israel know we did not build this altar for sacrifices." They explained their true motive. They said, We were afraid. One day your children might say to ours, 'You don't belong to the Lord.' So we built this altar, not for worship, but as a witness, a reminder. We too serve the Lord." When Phinehas and the delegation heard this, their hearts were lifted. The tension dissolved. Phinehas said, "Today we know the Lord is with us. You have not betrayed him." They returned to Shiloh with good news. War was avoided. Trust was restored. The altar was not a threat, but a testimony. It was named a witness between us, a sign of unity in a land now divided by distance, but still one in faith. Years passed. The Lord gave Israel rest. The enemies had been subdued, and the people were settled in their allotted lands. Joshua, now an old man, felt the weight of time. Sensing his days were coming to an end, he gathered the leaders, elders, judges, tribal heads, and officials. They assembled around him, the warrior-turned-shepherd who had led them from battlefields to peace. He spoke to them with calm authority. "You yourselves have seen what the Lord has done," he said. "It was the Lord who fought for you." Joshua did not take credit. He directed their eyes back to God. The land they now possessed was a promise kept, a victory given. He continued, "The Lord your God will continue to drive out the remaining nations. Be strong. Be careful to obey everything written in the book of the law of Moses." Joshua knew that peace would only last if the people remained faithful. Obedience was not optional, it was essential. He warned them against intermarriage with the nations still among them. "Do not serve their gods. Do not bow to their idols," he said. "Cling to the Lord your God, just as you have done until now." But then came the caution. If you turn away, if you align with these nations, if you worship their gods, the Lord will stop fighting for you. They will become snares and traps. Joshua reminded them, not one of the Lord's promises has failed. All have been fulfilled. But he also said, if you disobey, just as surely as the blessings came, so will the warnings be fulfilled. It was a clear message. Faithfulness led to flourishing. Disobedience would lead to ruin. For his final act as leader, Joshua called all the tribes together at Shechem. This was a sacred place, rich in meaning. Long ago, God had promised this very land to Abraham. Now, with that promise fulfilled, Joshua gathered the nation to renew their covenant with God. The people assembled before the Lord. Joshua then spoke, not as himself, but as a mouthpiece for God. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says." And then, in sweeping language, he retold their entire story. God spoke of choosing Abraham, of bringing Isaac, of raising up Jacob, of leading the people out of Egypt through Moses and Aaron. He recalled parting the Red Sea, defeating the Amorites, silencing Balaam's curses, and giving them a land they had not earned. The message was clear. God had done everything. Now it was time to choose. Joshua said, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the false gods your families once served." Then came his defining challenge. "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." The people responded with unity and emotion. "We will serve the Lord. He is our God." But Joshua pushed them further. "You are not able to serve the Lord lightly. He is holy. He is just. If you turn from him, he will bring consequences." Still, the people declared, "No, we will serve the Lord." So Joshua made the covenant official. He recorded their decision in the book of the law and set up a large stone under an oak near the sacred place. He said, "This stone is a witness. It has heard all the words spoken today. It will remind you if you turn away." Then Joshua dismissed the people, each to their inheritance. Soon after, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died. He was 110 years old. They buried him at Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim. His death marked the end of an era, but his life left a legacy of faith, leadership, and courage. Israel continued to serve the Lord during Joshua's lifetime and throughout the days of the elders who outlived him, those who had seen all the great works the Lord had done. They also buried the bones of Joseph, brought out of Egypt long ago in Shechem. That small act, years in the making, completed a promise made and kept. Eleazar, the son of Aaron and the high priest, also died and was buried at Gibeah in the hill country of Ephraim. The book of Joshua closes with peace. The land was settled, the leaders had spoken, and the people had declared together and aloud, "We will serve the Lord." This is the end. If you found this video valuable, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. It really helps share God's Word with more people. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you never miss out on powerful biblical teachings. Thanks for watching, and until next time, God bless you.